When my guest, Mario here, told me about CASA, that's Court-Appointed Special Advocates is what CASA stands for. For children facing neglect and abuse, I was immediately moved. Our instincts are to protect children. And they didn't do anything to bring on the situation they are in. And I can't imagine the fear and bewilderment of a child trying to navigate the courts, foster care, and the rest. Get this wrong, and you could easily end up with a kid who becomes a problem for society. Josiah Brown is the executive director of Connecticut CASA and has wide experience in nonprofits, including university administration, public schools, philanthropy, government, and community partnerships. The specifics of his resume, which is long, are on our website. He has a BA with distinction in history, magna cum laude from Yale, and a master's in public policy from Harvard. He and his wife, Sarah Usami Brown, live in New Haven with their 2 children. So welcome, Josiah. We look forward.
Thank you, Gary. Excuse me, Gary, and to Clem Sayers and to Mario for the connection to Gary. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you here at the Old Guard. And before I discuss the slide presentation that I think Gary is going to help me advance, I'll just say I have an amendment to his discussion of the First Amendment, and that's that I recall my 8th grade social studies teacher here in Connecticut Public Schools, Mr. Feltz, drilling into us a mnemonic device to recall the 5 provisions of the First Amendment, and he gave us RAPPS, or RAPS with an extra P, religion, assembly, press, petition, and speech. So that's a relatively easy way to remember the 5 provisions. So thank you, Mr. Feltz. He also made us memorize the entire preamble to the Constitution. So I won't bore you with that now. There are some slides here that I plan to loosely refer to, but I hope that given the ample time we can have somewhat of a discussion. I will welcome questions at any time. You can move to the next slide, Gary. So Connecticut CASA is relatively new in Connecticut in its current form. This is part of a national movement, so I'm going to touch on the national context, some of the state numbers with respect to children experiencing abuse or neglect, and then also talk about where CASA comes in, the volunteer advocates that we recruit and train and support at Connecticut CASA with our small staff and with support from board colleagues, including Mario, who is one of the leaders on the board, chairs our development fundraising committee. So next slide, please, Gary. So here's a brief overview. You can advance to the next slide. So as you see, CASA is in virtually every state around the country. It dates back over 4 decades to when a judge in Seattle felt that he did not have sufficient information to make decisions about the welfare of the children whose cases were before him, and he welcomed the input from a volunteer advocate who would get to know the child and provide additional information. And from that one Seattle judge, David Sukup, it has grown now so that virtually every state has CASA. There are each year nearly 100,000 volunteers serving nearly 300,000 children. And we have a quotation here from Marian Wright Edelman, founder of the Children's Defense Fund, about the role that CASA volunteers can play. Next slide, please. Here you see an overview of the picture in Connecticut. So this indicates that there are more than 7,000 children each year under the protection of the juvenile court on the child protection side. To distinguish it from the so-called delinquency side, there are 2 sides to the juvenile courts in Connecticut. We serve children on the so-called dependency side, and we work both with children in foster care and those at a prior stage known as protective supervision, where the hope, whenever safely possible, is that the children can remain with their families. That's certainly what everyone hopes for. And you see that we are now at CASA working in 7 of the 10 juvenile protection courts around the state, including now Hartford and New Britain in this general area, and 3 of the 4 largest overall. So in total, there are these, some 7,000 children. As recently as 2019, there were more than 10,000 children. So the pandemic was associated with a decline in the number of children under the supervision of DCF and the courts, and some of that is probably to the good, that there were some cases where it wasn't necessary. On the other hand, there could be some instances where children are, being overlooked and could use the additional oversight of DCF and the courts and perhaps a CASA volunteer. At any one time in Connecticut now, there are about 3,000 children in foster care. That number was more than 4,000 in 2019, and a significant contributor in the last decade or so to child neglect cases in particular has been the opioid epidemic, all over the state, affecting parents and their ability to care for children, ensure that they get to school, ensure that they get medical care, dental care, et cetera. So outright physical abuse is not nearly as common, but it certainly does come up, and sadly also horrific cases of sexual abuse, trafficking of girls in particular. So those are some of the issues that our volunteers have to deal with. Next slide. Here's just another look at the statewide picture. You can go on to the next slide, please, Gary. Yeah, I won't spend much time on this, but it is our mission statement showing that our aim is to recruit these volunteers who will help inform decisions about children's best interests, so every child has an opportunity to thrive in a safe, permanent home. And you can go to the next slide. We also have our vision and purpose there. The idea is that every child can benefit from having at least one caring, consistent adult in their life to help advance their interests. So here's a bit more in the way of details about our work. We recruit volunteers who range in age from 21 to well into their 70s and perhaps in their 80s as well. The aim is to get volunteers who have an array of life experiences, and we're always in particular looking for more male volunteers, so it's great to be here with this old guard group. If you personally or people you know of might be interested, I'm going to have in the back some copies of my business card, and Gary and Clem will know how to reach me as well. So the commitment is a significant one. It's greater than I would say. There are many worthy organizations deserving of your time, like Habitat for Humanity, Salvation Army, YMCA, were all mentioned today. This is one that is distinctive in that we seek a commitment of at least 18 months because we don't want our volunteers to be another adult just in and out of a child's life. So it is important that you recognize that up front. But if you do have the flexibility over the coming year and a half, 2 years to do that, the training is not too onerous. And these days, in fact, it's online. We have 30 hours, 15 of which occurs during 5 3-hour sessions in the evenings via Zoom, and then approximately another 15 hours that is self-paced using our online curriculum. So it's quite manageable. There is first a application process, as you would imagine, reference and background checks for this sort of position of responsibility. And we say that our volunteers, though they are not paid, it is in effect a professional role. We're seeking that level of preparation, careful communication and good judgment. And it involves visiting a child at least once a month. That's kind of the core of it. Gradually building a relationship with the child. The case may last 6 or 12 or 18 months or more, but visiting at least once a month is how the relationship can be forged. And then it also involves reporting to judges on a regular basis to inform their decisions through these written court reports that we submit 3 or 4 times a year, typically in advance of each hearing. And our volunteers identify resources to support the children and their families, particularly in the cases where the children are still at home with their families under protective supervision. And these services can range from birth to 3 to after school and summer programs, summer jobs for the older teens sometimes. And then, we are showing results that we've grown in just 4 years from 1 court, New Haven, to now 7 courts. And the most recent 12-month period, we served more than 150 of these high needs children. And we've received funding from a range of sources, including federal VOCA, Victims of Crime Act dollars, awarded competitively through the state judicial branch with very significant frequent reporting requirements, and then also foundation grants, individual donations, and such. So next slide, please. Here's a little more on what the training involves and the expectations. I'll just add that once you become a volunteer, we ask also at least 12 hours a year of continuing training in service, which is really quite manageable, an hour a month, and many of those opportunities are available online, webinars and so on. So here's more about the record, the results over time. You'll see a number of national court and judges groups have recognized CASA, formed partnerships, and in general, these are children who've experienced very significant trauma. So no case is easy, and we try to under-promise and over-deliver in each case. But in general, children who have these volunteers versus those who do not, they're less likely to return to the foster care system once they are placed in a permanent home. They tend to have better social, emotional, and academic outcomes. And I should say only about half the children in the foster system graduate high school, and only about 3% college. So anything that our volunteers can do, working in concert with the professional social workers, attorneys, educators, and so on, to help a child complete high school, for example, is very important. And then also an important measure of resilience is hope. And in general, children who've had CASA volunteers have greater levels of hope to help them overcome adversity in the years ahead. And here I have a slide for one of our stellar volunteers, Mr. Dwayne Jackson, someone that Mario indeed was the person who introduced us to. He originally was going to join our board, but he found it so compelling, the opportunity to work directly with a child, that he opted for that instead. Dwayne is now semi-retired from a corporate career with what was United Technologies, and he has, in the course of some 4+ years, taken on 5 cases for 10 children, and has often joined me for these kinds of presentations to help recruit volunteers, to inform judges and attorneys and social workers about the role that we play, complementing the roles of those professionals, and you'd find interviews with him on our YouTube channel as well. And here's a little more about some of the press coverage we've received over time, including the New York Times back in 2020. Nicholas Kristof, the columnist, each year chooses several causes to support, and that year he chose CASA as one to encourage people to volunteer with. And then the next year, the New York Times Giving Guide also included an essay by someone who had personal connection to the CASA movement. So this is all over the country, but our Connecticut entity is, it's a great opportunity as we grow. It's one of only 2 in the entire 49 state network where there's a single nonprofit organization ultimately serving the whole state. So we're at this early stage. We hope this will give us an opportunity to document, to build evaluation and measurement systems to be sure we're using our resources as efficiently as possible and benefiting children to the maximum extent, and also have the opportunity to learn and grow as we do. So that's something else that we're excited about, and Mario and other board members are helping guide us. And we're also working with now a colleague from UConn who may be directing a graduate student to assist us with these kinds of efforts. So again, there's a lot more information on our website, on our YouTube channel, but at this point, I think I'd like to stop and invite any questions you may have. Thank you.